What's going on, guys? Zane here with Everything Vive. Welcome back for another episode of the podcast. I have some keys to give away, and that is Beat Saber Steam keys. So before we jump into the episode, I just want to go over the winners. We had 2 keys to give away, one for Facebook and one for YouTube. And again, just a little plug for our for our Facebook page, which we just finally got set up. Facebook.com/everythingvive. We are posting the episodes there, and hopefully we'll have more content for you guys there in the near future and long future as well. So, and of course, youtube.com/everythingvive. Now, let us get into it. I randomly pulled these names out of a hat earlier. So for Facebook, we have, where is it? There we go. We have Lequan, Lequan, that's 2 words. And for YouTube, we have Eric J 1186. So Lequan and Eric J 1186. Now, you guys can message us on those respective platforms, so please make sure you do so. Let us know, or just shoot us a quick message, and we will get you the keys right away. So once you do that, you guys will be jamming out to some cool music on Beat Saber, which is just a fantastic game. So moving forward, we have an interview today that Ronnie took the lead on with 2MD VR Football, speaking with the team there. And yeah, this is really cool. I mean, I'm excited about how VR is going to, how VR is going to just upend so many different industries and how it's going to affect that. Obviously, football is a big one. And if you watched, I'm just going on a tangent here, but if you watched Ballers last season, I think you got to see a little bit about, they did something with VR there and how it's just going to be really cool how it affects all types of sports, training, things like that. So it was really cool to hear this episode, or hear this interview specifically with this team, because they're kind of in that arena, and I think it's really exciting to see, like I said before, what VR is going to do. Now, the other exciting part is that we are giving 2 Steam keys away for this as well. So we're going to do the same deal. It's going to be Facebook and YouTube. So this episode will have corresponding number, which is going to be episode number 101. We are in the triple digits now. So episode number 101 on Facebook and on YouTube. So depending on where you're listening to this, you can go to either platform or both, and leave us some feedback. Leave a comment. Let us know what you thought about the interview. Let us know what you think about VR and sports. And yeah, we'll have you entered in. And again, if you do both, you will be entered for double the chances to win a Steam key. So I don't want to spoil too much of the interview because there's a lot of really great content in there. So let us jump right in, and yeah, we'll check in with you guys soon. Enjoy the episode.
Hi everyone, this is Ronnie from Everything Vive, and I'm here today with a couple of gentlemen from Truant Pixel. I'm here with Maher and Ian. Hi guys, how are you guys doing?
Good, hi, yeah, doing good.
Hey, doing all right.
Perfect, and thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today. We're here mainly to talk about 2MD VR Football. I know you recently had a release of the game, for the PlayStation VR, but since we mostly cover, Vive games here, I wanted to talk just a little bit about the game, given its release on Steam, in late 2017, and kind of just talk about Truant Pixel in general. So if you guys could just briefly introduce yourselves and what your role is on the team, that'd be great.
Okay. My name's Maher. I'm I'm the president and co-founder of Truant Pixel. And because we're a very small organization, we all have multiple jobs, and mine is whatever that is. And also doing, I'm kind of the lead artist and designer and lead sound technician, composer, a bunch of basically anything else like that. I do all the publishing duties and stuff. And
okay.
A lot of the boring stuff too.
Yeah.
And yeah. What about you, Ian?
I'm Ian. I mostly programming. I guess I did sort of co-develop 2MD, so a little more of the
Yeah,
design side there.
What would that entail exactly? Like when you say you co-developed that specific title, like did you take more of a lead on the design, or kind of what did that entail?
Yeah, so this was 2MD was sort of an idea me and my brother hatched up over Thanksgiving. I guess that would have been 2016.
Yes.
And yeah, sort of specifically for the VR space, because we felt that the idea was a good fit for kind of the area, the play space you kind of have to work with like a room scale VR. You know, it was Vive at the time. It was our first sort of platform for it, because it had just recently. When did the Vive come out?
It was earlier the year, I believe. You guys had come over and played it at our place.
Yeah, and I bought one shortly after.
That's a story that I hear from a lot of people. Just as far as one person picks up a Vive and then has some friends over, and then pretty soon people are shooting ideas and coming up with concepts of what might work for a game. And
exactly. So that was sort of ours. We're like, the space is about right. So, you're moving around in that area, in the sort of the pocket. You've got all the control to be able to throw and do that. So, I think this really works for the kind of, the area that you have, and sort of our scope of what we can do with, being a small team.
Yeah. And before you guys were kind of starting to get into some of the VR stuff, you guys were working together at Truant Pixel prior to the VR work, or what was kind of the background of the studio a little bit?
We opened the studio, I think, in 2000. I think officially it was open in 2008, and it started out just kind of like as a little design. It's independent studio. It was actually just me at the time. It was me doing like dynamic themes for PlayStation 3.
Okay.
And I had done, they had opened up theme design, and I was just playing around with it.
And you have you have some background in art, or like
like just with like using the tools and stuff, and I picking up the really weird custom markup language that they use for it, because it's not like C#, it's not Java, it's all like it's all like a XML. And I was putting out stuff in the community, and somebody at Konami, of all places, noticed it and said, "Hey, could you help us make a theme for Silent Hill?" I said, "Sure, okay."
Huh.
I didn't know that was the first one.
That was the first official one, and then from there,
Konami.
We did a bunch of Konami ones, and then that guy left Konami and moved to Sega, and he kind of took us with him. He's like, "We want you to make stuff for Sega." So we did a bunch of stuff for Sega, and that we were able. It wasn't really much of a business at the point, because it's not a lot of money, and it's really more kind of like, hey, we get to play with these fun IPs a little bit, involved, and get a peek into this weird world, and then after that, I think come around 2012 or 2013, we're like, well, we really want to make games, so let's make games. And so we started working. We worked on a VR prototype for a platform game, which is still very much on our back burner now, because it's kind of like, as the technology has gotten better, so we have all these other different ideas we want to try.
Yeah.
And it started with, we were messing around with Oculus stuff, and then we built a demo, and we sent that to Sony, and Sony said, "Oh, we'll send you a PlayStation VR development kit."
Okay. And how early was this? Like around what time do you think this was?
Mid 2015, I think. Or 2016. It was early. It was before it came out.
Okay.
Actually, no, mid 2015. Because we got the kit, and then we decided, well, let's make a game. We need to make a game for PlayStation. We have to make something, simple, and because we had to expand our market a little bit, because all we were doing was doing dynamic themes, which was making money.
Yeah.
That's a really niche thing to be working on. So
sure, and you had these connections at Sony already from doing the themes, so you figured you'd kind of transition that into into the game.
Let's go legit. Let's go legit with game development. So we made a small game, just a small arcade game, using just that was kind of developed around some fun physics that Ian had come up with, actually playing around with the engine. And we released that. It was like, okay, this is kind of like a Snake game or Pac-Man or something. It wasn't really super exciting. But then we said, well, let's put it in VR. And we adapted the game for VR, and it actually it got a much better response when the VR patch went out. And because it was cool, because you were swimming around in these micro environments as a microscopic organism, and you have to look around in VR. And it was one of the few games on the PSVR. It's still one of the few games that would allow for continuous locomotion in 360 degrees. Huh. It doesn't use snap turning. It doesn't use teleportation. It's continuous locomotion. And it was one of the only ones that did that for the longest time, I think. And I still get, occasionally get messages from people saying, hey, this game's fun, which is cool. Some people, it's like completely obtuse and weird. They don't like it. So, yeah. And you're not going to please everybody. But then we went from there. We started working on Akash, which is our traditional title, the Otome title that, we started working on. That's pretty far into production now. And then it was Thanksgiving weekend, Thanksgiving holiday weekend, 2016. Before that, I think Ian and his brother had come by and they tried out the Vive, and then shortly after that, you guys came by again, and they actually had already whipped up a very, very simple prototype that employed a bunch of capsule primitives,
capsules with side capsules for their little shoulders,
and a vaguely ball-shaped ellipse. And I think there was to get to the field from the locker room, because you had the whiteboard already, and to get from the field locker room, you had to reach over and grab a door handle.
Okay.
And he kind of presents hey, we should, could we make this develop into something? He's like, yeah, we could. This seemed pretty cool. So we kind of talked about ideas, and we all agreed that it should be lighthearted because we're not EA and we don't have $10 million to invest in motion capture studio. We don't have, an NFL license, because a lot of these games live or die by the license. And the thing that kind of stood out, nobody had tried it at this point.
Yeah.
And so we started developing that, and that's all. It was all, remote development.
Not to stop you too much from there, but it's fascinating to me that you guys kind of jumped from working on the themes, and now you're full, you were able to release something, a VR title for the PlayStation VR, and now you guys are working on the Vive. What was the process like moving from just making the themes to then figuring out what it took to kind of put together kind of a software title to experimenting in VR? I mean, was it a crazy learning curve, or had you guys?
Honestly, I would say, I can't speak for Ian for the programming side of things, but from the modeling side of things, I mean, everything in dynamic themes has to be really, 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 really well optimized. Oftentimes we have to bake lighting. You have to use all these shortcuts and tricks. And I mean, we have stuff that we do that we consider it to be trade secrets. We don't share it with Sony, even how we do some of the dynamic theme stuff. The funny thing is, when you're talking about VR, especially PlayStation VR, you're talking about a programming and processing environment that's highly restrictive, because you have to bust out a frame rate of 90 hertz or more. And in the case of the PlayStation, you have a really your CPU may be a little bit more handicapped than say on a PC. And so that
Vive requirements are a little beefier. Yeah?
Oh God! Remember when we started messing with the Vive? It was like, we can do that. Wow! We can do all this stuff. We start throwing everything at it, just completely tossing caution to the wind. And say, oh, we can have these really high poly players and high poly this, and then it was a major reality check when we
came back into bite.
VR. It's like, oh, we can't do all this stuff.
Yeah, and it's funny because you guys obviously started out with the Sony connection, and then I'm realizing now that obviously 2MD came out on Steam before you guys were able to get the release over to PlayStation VR? Like, was that some of just the idea that, the game concept was developed for the Vive and then kind of scaling that so that it would work properly on the PlayStation?
Yeah, I think that's fairly accurate. Well, I mean, we didn't really know, because if the PlayStation would have been a good platform for it, like luckily with the Move controllers have a lot of tech in there. I didn't realize that made it possible, but at the time it was like the Vive is, it's got exactly what we need.
Mm-hmm.
You have the controllers, you got the full motion with them, so we can do the sort of like physics of the throwing. You've got the room scale, the lighthouses, so you've got this space you can move freely in.
Yeah.
So I mean, we had come up with it with the Vive in mind, like this is perfect for it. So switching over to the PlayStation VR, it really started out as let's move it over and let's see how well it works, and if it works well, great. If not, then tough break, I guess. But it ended up working out.
And what was it like trying to kind of nail down some of those mechanics? Like you guys mentioned, like for people out there that haven't gotten a chance to play it yet, I mean, it's 2MD is all about, you're the quarterback, and it's, not only are you kind of drawing up plays before you're able to jump into the games, but, once you're in, you're throwing the ball to different receivers, taking routes, and like there's also some mini games like revolving around the throwing. So like obviously the throwing mechanic, if it didn't feel right, it would kind of be a game breaker. And for me anyways, like as soon as I jumped in, like I know you guys gave the player the control during the tutorial to be able to kind of gear in the some of the settings to make it feel right for how people are playing it. But I mean, me surprisingly, I jumped in and like I felt the right amount. Like for me anyways, like at first it was like a little bit funny to get used to like fully extending my arm like that because you give all those warnings, but like it's one of those things like when you're actually throwing a football, like you're holding those Vive controllers, and even with the wrist straps, you're like, do I want to go out that far? But like then you get used to it, and it's just a very like fluid, like it feels like you're really like giving the ball the right amount of push to get it to who you're throwing. So like, yeah, talk about, I guess, what it took to make that feel right.
It's funny how I mean, we didn't know how it was going to work exactly at first either, and it's funny how quickly really it's sort of fell into place, right? We did tweak it a little later in the process, but even early on, it was like we were like, wow, that I thought that was going to be more difficult to get that correct. Now, I will say about the tweaking thing in there, that came about when we're like, why don't let's have the Oculus support as well, because it out of the gate did not feel right. Like it would go straight into the dirt, and we're like, oh wow, I didn't expect that to be that different. And I don't know what it could be other than the release of the trigger. I guess how it detects that has been lifted is different, and so the tweaking of it came from, let's let them tweak their release to get it to feel right, and by doing that we could get it to adjust correctly. So, and
moving it over to PlayStation VR, like what was that like an additional challenge of trying to like figure out how to get everything to work properly once you
it's PlayStation VR is quite a bit different because like with the Vive, the tracking on the controller is pretty good, so that's enough. With the PlayStation VR, since you've got the one front camera, if you're at the right distance, it actually works pretty well. But the way we ended up doing that was actually a little bit different. by using the controller's actual, like, it has can't think of the word.
Has a gyro and it has a
Yeah.
magnetometer and it has the tracking too.
Yeah, so you can
And
get
accelerometer.
you can get the actual, like, how hard you're hucking the thing, velocity values. So we kind
So
of use,
to some extent, it's more complicated in that, like, you have all those different kind of systems that are at play to kind of determine, like, that's really interesting.
And Ronnie, I got to puff up Ian a little bit because, like, we constantly were getting back from people that this is that, at least on the PlayStation VR, that the throwing is, like, the motion and the throwing and the tracking is the most accurate they've ever played with.
Wow.
Like, it's been hilarious watching the streams because at first people they'll hike the ball and then they'll waggle, like they'll just flick their wrist like it's going to do something. Ball will fall, and then it's like, oh, I guess, and the guy throws it, and they're like, what? Like, everybody's response is like relief, because up to this point, no one's really taken advantage of all the data that those computers can generate. Which on the Vive, of course, Vive remotes are, I mean, you're getting a lot more accurate data in 360 degrees versus, tiny little webcam on top of on top of your TV.
Yeah.
Because it's really calculated with the motion of your arm more than just the point at which you let go. It's tracking that before that point.
Yeah.
No, but that's really interesting. Yeah, because I mean, with a lot of stuff, like, I guess there's different challenges depending on exactly what you're trying to accomplish with each system. But, like, kind of like you said, like with the Vive, you have a really solid tracking system for what the controllers are doing, and then you have to kind of try to determine what the player's intent is based on just that single feedback loop that's really detailed. Whereas I guess, like, with a PlayStation VR setup, from what you're saying, I mean, it sounds like if you take the time to really understand what's happening with all of those other systems and the controllers, that you're able to there's a lot more data there than what people would really on first glance expect there to be, right?
It does. It has a lot of tech in there, and I feel like for most things you don't really probably ever need to use it, but I think we were actually able to make use of them. So hey, I'm kind of glad they're in there.
Everything that we were looking at when it came down to figuring out, because when I made the announcement, they let me write the blog post for the announcement, I mentioned that we built it from the ground up for PlayStation VR, and that's the truth. Like, we took everything. I think all of the like all the player models, all of the stadium models are similar between the two versions of the game, but everything else, and the AI is also similar. But the everything down to how detailed the lines on the whiteboard were, how the hands are rendered, the player models, how the and more importantly, how the throwing model works is completely different from the PlayStation. But the end product is comparable in terms of its quality and whatnot, which was very gratifying.
Yeah, well, that's awesome work on your part, because I feel like that's what everybody always wants with different releases of the games. You always worry that it's made more for one platform versus the other, especially with the differences, and like you see it a lot more, I think, when a game was initially made just for the PlayStation VR and then is kind of quickly ported over to Steam. Like, you'll see kind of some limitations as far as like what they were able to do. Not really, like they you cut corners a little bit because the PlayStation can't keep up with everything, and then those seem like something's missing when you translate it to the. So to see it kind of go backwards, and then you guys find a way to kind of bring that higher level of fidelity over to the PlayStation VR, I feel like it's the opposite effect that you usually get from those kind of transfers, where you have PlayStation VR users that maybe aren't as used to having such high precision, controller input, and all of a sudden they're being blown away with just how much control they have. That's That's really exciting to hear.
Although it's probably on us, it's probably easier because all of our characters are tackle dummies.
Well, and that's like another thing. Like, I mean, when I played the game, like, like, I mean, in my experience, most of the like a lot of the really impressive VR titles that I go back to over and over again, like, you never go back to VR because you're necessarily like in a hyper realistic, like crazy. You're more interested in having fun, and in VR, the kinds of things that work are usually the things that are more like attention grabbing, more like you're able to quickly read and play, and especially like in a game where you're a quarterback, like I thought, and I don't know if this was intentional or not, but the fact that like the dummies are a little bit shorter made me feel like I had quarterback vision, like I could see the whole field in front of me, and I was able to make plays and feel like I was some awesome quarterback making a play on a drive where, like, in reality, 5'8" Ronnie or whatever probably wouldn't be able to get a ball like, a few feet in front of him.
As 5'7" Ian, I'm with you there.
It's 5'5" me.
It's funny you mentioned that though, because our very first builds of it, we were like, let's make the linebackers actually, like 6'3", 6'4", and if you're short, I mean that's your problem, man. And yeah, so that was me. Like now I'm just sort of like trying to get it over their heads because I can't see, and I've got 2 marks in my ceiling now because I have to like jump up and throw it as high as I could, and I would smack the ceiling.
We destroy ceiling fans, by the way. But at last count, I think we've destroyed like 7 or 8 ceiling fans, like 4 on the Vive, and now I think like 3 or 4 on PlayStation VR. And the funny thing is, people are happy when they're telling us that they broke their ceiling fan.
They need to move their setup, I think.
Yeah, it's like, what are you doing with the ceiling fan? But it also should be said, since we're talking about the players, though, too, is that the AI in the game is really fun. It's part of what makes it fun. And I think Cole he programmed the AI for the players, didn't he? Like all of the, and he told me, when I was asking him about, like, at one point I sat him down and said, what kind of stuff did they do? And it's kind of cool because they all behave independently, but but as you go through the game and it starts to get harder, they start working together. And you'll start seeing like things like man defense and zone defense. And the funny thing is, I started getting a couple emails from people, one person saying, understandably kind of frustrated, like he's getting to round 6 and he cannot beat it. And, he's like, I think the game is bugged. You got to fix it. I said, no, it's not bugged. It's just really hard.
Ramps up a little.
That's really funny that someone would go out of their way to email to say, like, this obviously is broken because I'm amazing at the game, and
it's
3 or 4 times. 3 or 4 times.
Online game, they must be hacking.
Yeah.
I mean, like 3 or 4 times the same person email, and I'm not disparaging this person.
No,
I mean, frustration. I understand his frustration. And I keep telling him, listen,
I've never beat round 6, so
it's really, really difficult. He's like, well, my guys always drop the ball. And it's like, well, no, they don't always drop the ball. That stuff doesn't change. Like how fast your players are, how well they're handling, all your strategies. Mm-hmm. That doesn't change. The only thing that changes is how fast the AI reacts. And that's where the play calling comes in. You have to use the plays to beat the AI. You can't just have a good throwing arm.
And that's actually something really cool that, like, I mean, going into the game, I wasn't necessarily, like, I knew it was a football game and I knew I was going to be a quarterback, but before I had a chance to try it out myself, I wasn't necessarily, like, I didn't necessarily know I was going to be able to make plays. And the way you guys did it was really, like, easy and intuitive and effective, and that you're able to just, again, like, it's one of those things, like, using the inputs that VR provides you to be able to draw out the lines of the routes that your receivers are going to like. It's easy, but at the same time, it feels like you have it's such a cool feeling to be able to draw your routes and make your plays on the whiteboard, and then go and then see that translate on the field. Like, and that's really cool. That, I mean, it sounds like that was one of Ian's first ideas to kind of include in the game.
Yeah, that was probably the first thing I really fleshed out to, too. As soon as we got the VR stuff on there, was like, okay, yeah, we need a way to do this. You know, I had seen you're probably familiar with like the like Steam Lab.
The lab, yeah.
Demo had in the actual lab room had like a whiteboard on the wall.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, does this actually work? And I was like, yeah, I don't know. There was like a dinosaur on it, and you could sort of fill it in. It had no purpose, but I was like, huh, that's an interesting idea. So I was sort of like, we could do that, but now we could also actually make it be sort of your interface for how you change around your team and draw your routes, and
Yeah, and it's super intuitive. Like I said, like I'm one of those kind of people that, not that I don't play like more complicated games, but like sometimes when a game is kind of too menu heavy or too like, fit like I just want to get in and play. And the way the drawing out plays worked with a whiteboard, it was just so easy. Like even for someone like me that initially was like, oh, is this going to be like, a little bit too involved for me? Like, no, it was super accessible. And when I started getting rewarded, and kind of to what Maher was saying earlier about the AI, like when you realize what the plays that you're drawing up, and you're kind of seeing what those effects are on the AI, it's like a really rewarding experience to feel like you came up with the idea that's kind of getting you through the game.
Yeah, I totally agree. And we actually specifically made the default plays kind of like, they're okay, but they're the kind of thing like you can go into the game once, play a few rounds, and then be like, I can improve this. And then I've seen it a lot with people playing it. The kind of process has been, at first it's just like, all right, get me into the game. I want to start. I don't want to mess with any of that. They play a few rounds, and then they're like, all right, I want to go back, and I'm going to draw this up. Like, I think will work. And yeah, everyone seems to like that. And I think it's kind of one of the really cool things about VR in general is that you really don't have to be menu heavy. Like I think it really works well to try to design the game where it's like you do it intuitively because you're in the space, and your interface is almost like if you were actually there. This controller is my hand, and I pick up a thing, and it doesn't need to tell me how to use it because you use it how you actually use it. So I pick up a marker, and oh yeah, I know to press this to the board. Oh, there's a thing on the board. I know I can pick it up and move it, like a magnet. And so that was really kind of one of the big goals of the game, is like, let's make this as interface light as possible.
Yeah. And I mean, as far as like, I know since Maher worked on like, it sounded like a lot of the like 3D modeling and kind of more of the art stuff, like, yeah, what was it like kind of figuring out like how detailed you wanted to get versus how abstract? And I know you didn't have the licenses and that sort of thing. So like figuring out kind of how you wanted to take those kind of decisions, like what theme you wanted to go with for the game. Like, was that...
That was actually a pretty early design decision. Was like, I think very early on, we were almost thinking like they could just be little bouncing helmets, and I can't remember. It probably was some kind of like NFL ad or something that had like the little goofy cartoon like helmets. But then I don't know why. I don't know who thought of it first. Was like, what if they're just like tackle dummies? Just like the.
Well, we talked about that because it was when we sat down to kind of hash out how we would get all of this running, and how you guys had done the movement. Yeah. And the idea, I think initially we talked about like doing them as like, let's like, well, they don't have any. At first, I think we were going to give them hands.
Oh yeah, because
and they were going to be. It was going to have more of a sci-fi look to it. They're going to be like floaty robots. In fact, I think I still have the picture somewhere. Like I mocked it up.
The whole backstory envisioned where it was like football robots became like the sport of the future, but then like humanity had died out, and all that's left are these robots. But all they know how to do is play football. So it was just this sort of like we were going to put in little hints that like the only thing left of society was these stadiums, and outside of it, it was just like a wasteland. But it's like
post-apocalyptic football robot future.
The football robots were just doing what they knew. And
then it kind of can become he's like, well, we want to appeal enough. Like we kind of decided let's go for more like a Pixar look.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, no worries. It's like it was less work anyway.
Yeah, no, and I mean, there's like a lot of personality, like as far as the fact that they're, just like kind of practice, like tackle dummies, like it makes all the little animations and like kind of the bobbing up and down and tackles and all that stuff, like kind of a lot more charming because it's funny to just think that they're all out there just kind of, that's what you're up against, like.
Because the funny thing is, real tackle dummies are actually a lot less complex looking. They're just like really would be just going back to the cylinder, the cylinder on the sled, and that was it. It's like we added like helmets and jerseys and names and all sorts of crazy
cheerleader dummies, and I feel like the coach made it with a little mustache.
And then we have what I tell everybody now is like the coach is actually just the mustache. It's like the coach's ascension mustache.
Kind of like it kind of reminds me, like obviously you guys released this beforehand, but like reminds me of like Super Mario Odyssey or something with like the mustache like taking over.
It possesses.
The coach can kind of just possess any practice dummy he wants and just become...
Every team has the same coach. He just possesses different. What's funny actually about it is that in the game, and I don't think a lot of people picked up on this. I don't know if we're doing a different audience, but like we got like Xander Mobus to do the announcer, like Smash Brothers, and he's got a whole lot of stuff to his credit. And then when we released the PSVR version, we got Pro ZD like Sungwon Cho to do the coach because he's got like this epic baritone voice, and it was kind of funny. We're like. Because remember when we're doing a recording session, he's like, "Okay, so how do you want me to do this?" We're like, "Can you sound like what's his name? Like Dick Butkus? Can you sound like Dick Butkus?" I don't know who Dick Butkus is. It's like, have you ever heard an NFL coach talk? No. It's like, okay, just do your gruffest. Just do gruff. Gruff like a truck driver. Saying that's how. You're tired of being here. It's like, okay,
man's man.
Yeah.
It's like you knew he could do it. He just.
It's just kind of funny because like none of us, were really like at least us here, like myself and him and and Suha, like we're not really super into football. So it's like we're throwing names. I was like, I guess I really don't know what Dick Butkus sounds like either. Let me find a YouTube.
I mean, he's a little before my time, so I can't, to be honest, say I've ever really heard him.
I mean, he just has that name you want to say, especially if you're like a 12th grader.
It definitely sounds awesome. So, but yeah, so that's great. So I mean, yeah, what as far as like the goals that you guys set out to make, like when you wanted to kind of make something like this for Steam VR, and now you're getting it out on PlayStation VR. I mean, what were some of kind of the big takeaways, and as far as like what you guys are hoping to take with you maybe onto future VR projects?
I think one big thing I was surprised by, the running mechanic that your quarterback can run, was not added to the game until pretty late in its development. It was almost as an afterthought, because for the longest time we're like, it's not really necessary. That's not really the idea behind the game. Mm-hmm. We weren't sure how jarring it would be to have the sort of kind of not staggered movement. Mm. But when we put it in the game, and as long as we don't make you fly down the field, which we didn't really want you to, it actually was was really pretty smooth, and it worked well. And I think whereas before we were very afraid to kind of do a free movement in VR, I think now I'm a little more open to starting development of a game with that in mind, rather than as the afterthought, like, yeah, let's put it in there and see if it works, and if it doesn't, we don't need it.
I think the other reason that we didn't do movement initially was because we had kind of come off of Vive, and Sony. Remember, Sony has the VR comfort testing. There's this whole other layer of quality assurance that they do, basically to make sure that you can't release you can't release a game on PSVR that's going to make people throw up. And so it was in the back and forth. Vive had 360-degree movement, continuous movement, but we had the most it was ridiculous back and forth.
We pushed the limit on that, I think, a little bit.
I think eventually they just got tired of me and just said, okay, fine. But because they're saying things like, this makes player uncomfortable, this makes player uncomfortable, this makes player uncomfortable. We're like, well, that's kind of the point, isn't it? Like at one point, what is it? They said this is too big, it's scary. It's like, it's supposed to be scary.
Too big and scary.
So we're like
you're spelunking under an underwater cavern.
Well, no, they like the blood, when you're swimming through the blood, they're like, the color red is too prominent. We're like, it's blood. But it came down to, and I understand where they're coming from, of course, but it's hard because everything was from overseas, and it was being translated, bug reports being translated by an intermediary, then sent to us. And then make our response, make our changes, send it back, and they sometimes fix it, sometimes they say, nope, it's not fixed yet. And you kind of get, I think Ian and I, we kind of talked about it because we ran into it a lot less so with Vive, with 2MD, but you get a report back and we'd say, okay, this is broken. I said, okay, we'll fix it. And so we fixed it, we sent it back, and then they'd be like, what? They'd be like, this isn't fixed yet. And we're like,
yes, it is.
And we kind of were like, this is kind of like that episodes of The Simpsons with the baseball players, and was it Wade Boggs? And he's telling him to shave his sideburns.
I think you're thinking of a Futurama episode. Yeah, I don't know, because again, these were sort of baseball players before my time.
It was like he's like saying, shave those sideburns, and the guy eventually shows up with his whole head shaved. He's like, I told you to shave those sideburns. You're off the team.
Did you notice? I mean, did that process change at all between when you released Vive and when you went to try to release 2MD? As far as is the process easier now compared to before?
I think
it was a little easier.
We were better at it because we predicted that, because I still had the old reports. I'm like, they want us to do this and this and this, and we made sure that because one thing you'll notice about even the PSVR version is that there are 0 frame drops in the entire game. At no point does the frame rate or the reprojection rate drop below 120 hertz. And that's by design, because we have to hide any potential frame drops and loading screens and this, but nothing happens during gameplay. That's a thing that they mandate, which makes sense, because I've seen some don't have that, and it's obvious. I mean, it really takes you out of it. It's really uncomfortable when the frame rate drops.
Yeah. The route drawing was what.
Oh yeah, that was it. It's like, well, there were it's always the last thing you think of. It's because near the very end we were ironing everything out, but you change routes, and it's like, man, why is the frame rate tanking for it just happened for a second, and it's imperceptible. If you're playing, you can't see it, but the dev kit will flag it and say, you dropped some frames, and they will latch on and say, fix this. And it's like, well, we got to get rid of these. And it ended up being the amount of geometry being used for the route was, for one of the default routes, was still the PC version.
That's crazy. That's interesting, just because I like you were saying, I totally understand why they would be really protective of trying to make sure that the player experience is good, especially on something like the PlayStation VR, where you potentially have new people that have never tried VR getting into it for the first time, whatever. But on the other hand, like it's like, as someone that's kind of, been playing VR titles since the Vive and even the Oculus dev kits and whatnot, like you've kind of seen the market, I think, tend to kind of start to go towards some of the less comfortable experiences, and kind of chalking it up to, well, to some extent, like there's certain faux pas that, oh, we know that this isn't good design, this will make the player sick, don't use it. But then to some extent, like if you're getting nauseated because your game requires a certain mechanic, like you're starting to see more and more developers kind of like what Ian was saying when it comes to like free roaming movement. Like you're starting to see a lot more people say, if this experience isn't going to be for everyone, but for people that want this experience, like we want to do it. So like it's just kind of interesting to see where VR is heading versus like limiting itself to some of these more, these easier to digest, like super comfortable situations, like flawless playback and whatnot, versus like some of the stuff out there that's just going wild and crazy. And
it's funny too, because when we first got into the VR, we had like an Oculus version 1 dev kit. We were looking at our VR platformer game that Maher mentioned. And I swear, and it was a very like experimental time. Like, let's just, it wasn't out yet. It was really the only thing you could get a dev kit for at the time. And so it was just like everything that you could find for it was people just being like, let's make a roller coaster. And like, it was all sorts of things. Like, let's make the big like swinging ship, but it's going to go all the way around. And, if you go too fast, it's going to fling you off of it and you're just going to go spinning. Like they were just trying to like make you throw up and uncomfortable. And to have gone from that to now.
Yeah. And like back again to some extent, like,
yeah, I think there was sort of a test the limits, or rather, go all out. Oh, this makes me sick. And it's like, then there was this step it way back. We can't make anyone at all uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then now I think it's sort of back to, all right, what can we push in the name of better playability, I guess.
Yeah.
And I think it's also probably the technology too has improved. I think as you see that get better, I think some of those things become less and less of an issue.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And just as far as, the key, I think, is that, you have developers that are really like making the decisions they're making intentionally because it serves the purpose of their game, versus like, bad ports of non-VR titles to VR, or like, I think there's a difference, as far as like when you're trying
Absolutely.
to seek out comfort versus, like what works for your game. And
Yeah, and that was sort of exactly my point. Was 2MD was very much, this is an idea that will work within the bounds of VR. It doesn't have to move you, or you don't have to move or spin around. You're not navigating complex environments. But I think towards the end of development, we realized you can do a few of those things just fine. And I think, for maybe the next thing I would want to do in VR, I think very much could be, all right, now we can give the player a bigger space to move around in, move freely in, and it's not as much of an issue as we thought it would be, when we started 2MD.
Very interesting. Yeah, so with I guess on that note, kind of from both of your perspectives, where like as enthusiasts that just like enjoying VR, to developers that are interested in working on future titles potentially, what are some of the things, like where do you hope the technology goes? Like as far as someone that's worked on it, what would you like to see incorporated into future versions of VR tech.
I really want, and this is funny because I feel like we had a conversation related to 2MD. You know, someone from Europe were like, "Oh, this is the other football," and we're like, "Yeah, sorry, it's kind of hard to stick a controller to your foot." But I would like to see more of like using your actual body as the controller, not needing a controller so much. So you could actually do something like, okay, it's tracking my foot, so I can kick a ball now, or it's just using my hand. So, and it has enough fidelity on each of my fingers. I don't know, you have a glove, or I don't know what the sort of peripheral would be, that I can just physically put my hand around the virtual object to pick it up or to interact with it. I think that is sort of the next step for me in terms of making it a more immersive experience.
And what about you, Maher?
Being the graphics person, for me, it's true foveated rendering. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah. As far as like, I mean, if you want to explain to the listeners, just
so basically, when you're essentially focusing, what's a good? I'm trying to think what's a good way to describe it that makes sense.
Where your eyes focus.
Yeah, it's more or less like instead of like the way I think of it, and correct me if I'm wrong, but like rather than a sweet spot on the screen being like a physical spot on the screen, it's more like following, like the way your eyes work in real life is that you look wherever your focus, the focus of your retina is. There's like a very small amount of space that's in high resolution at that specific place, and it's like.
Yeah, I was trying to avoid giving too much medical jargon, but basically, if I'll just lay it out there. The fova is a small depression. It's in the retina, that area in the retina where visual acuity is the highest. And the concept behind foveated rendering is being able to track where that moves in space as your eyes are moving, and make sure the highest fidelity visuals are strictly focused there, so that things around the periphery can have lower fidelity and you won't notice.
Yeah.
And that also, in fact, that actually works with normal physiologic vision as well. And the idea being that being able to do that will open up much lighter platforms to being able to do VR effectively. I think like, what is it? Oculus Go has fixed foveated rendering, but I think you have to keep your eyes fixed on a certain point to get the benefit of that. Tracking the eye's movement, because your eye is constantly moving and scanning and whatnot, and interpolating that is the hard part. And there's still there's still companies that are working to crack that, I think, in a way that is feasible from a consumer perspective.
Yeah.
But that, people talk about it getting higher fidelity, and higher fidelity screens are good, and better processing is good, and all of those things are just going to happen as the technology evolves. But I think that one element is going to be the point where it takes a giant leap.
Yeah.
Because
because one of the things that, I mean, like right now, in order to have higher resolution screens, I mean, you're talking like exponentially more and more powerful hardware that's able to actually process that. But if foveated rendering, works the way you'd like it to, then all of a sudden you can have those really high resolutions, but in a very small amount of space that don't require, this.
Right. I mean, you have to have really high pixel. I mean, we need higher pixel density in the screens. It's ironic because I bought our studio got a Vive Pro.
Yeah.
After GDC, and we were very much kind of crunching to finish 2MD. I say crunch, and not in the literal sense. We have good hours here, but it's still sitting in the box. Like, I haven't had a chance to pull it out, bust it out to see how good because the rendering is supposed to be much better with that. But the problem with having a higher fidelity displays is that you have to have horsepower to drive those displays effectively.
Yeah,
and that is that's a major hurdle, and something that we kind of ran into to a smaller degree with the PlayStation VR version, because PlayStation, especially its CPU, really are made to drive like really high, a lot of the high fidelity visuals that VR requires at the rate that it is necessary. But Sony's done some pretty amazing things with optimization and predictive tracking that make it possible. So that's also impressive too. So seeing where that's going to go, that's what captures my imagination too.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, because I mean, one of the things, just in thinking about what both of you guys talked about, like as far as the like foveate, like being able to track eye movement versus increased body input into games, and like all of this really is, I think, to just be able to allow people to be more immersed in their VR experiences. And like one of the side effects, I think, from using like the screen tech that you were talking about is just the fact that sometimes like a lot of stuff in VR, like in my experience anyways, tends to have kind of like unforeseen or like additional side benefits that you wouldn't necessarily think would come with that specific type of advancement. And like with foveated lenses, for example, like the reason that comes to mind on that is like I wonder how players would react differently in VR when they're no longer kind of required to completely move their head in order to see like things as clearly as they may be able to if they're just moving their eyes, for example. Or like one of the things like you notice when you see people start to kind of experiment with some of the wireless solutions that are out there and the ones that are going to come to market is not only the fact that it's wireless, but the fact that like all of a sudden people are behaving in a more natural way when they didn't even realize that they were really like kind of artificially limiting what they were doing based on the hardware that we have now. Like so it's just interesting to think like the further along like we get with those things, just to see how people will interact with games in the future, and what new things that you guys will be able to maybe implement when you see kind of the possibilities there when you get to try out that new tech for the first time. So it's all exciting stuff. So and yeah, I had a blast playing 2MD. So I just wanted to commend you guys for an awesome VR experience. Like I said, like me going into it, I wasn't 100% sure like the whole scope of the game or whatever. Like always the test for me is like, am I going to come back to this time and time again? Like, am I just having fun with the core experience of the game? And in 2MD, like I felt like I was a quarterback, and I felt like once I started connecting those throws, like it was one of those feelings that like, for those moments that you're in the game, like you're getting a sense of something that you don't get to experience anywhere else. So
thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, if there's any, I guess just like as a final point for just kind of a, kind of just shameless plug on your part or whatever, where should people follow Truant Pixel, and where can people, give their feedback and learn more about what you guys are going to be up to in the future?
On Twitter generally is, I think, where we're doing most of our social media push. It's at Truant Pixel.
Okay.
And we also have a YouTube channel. We still do the dynamic themes, of course, and we're going to be publishing some new ones. Actually, a new one comes out tomorrow. Okay. It's very much Blade Runner inspired.
Ooh.
And Ian knows what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And we figured out a way to do frustum culling in the theme software, which is like, it's not supposed to be able to do this, but we can make it happen. I put a lot of stuff on YouTube, which is also our YouTube channel is just Truant Pixel. I look for people to give feedback and whatnot, and we'll put up fun stuff sometimes.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you both again for taking the time to speak with me, and good luck with the theme that's going to be releasing soon, and your recent release on PlayStation VR.
Oh, thanks for having us.
Thanks so much.
You're welcome. Take care.
Take care.